Hello, I'm Voiding, and welcome back to the Chronos server. Today I wanted to make a quick unscripted video about a new quarry that I designed, with fellow Chronos members Attila and Binary, and there's a few more credits throughout the video for storage and decoration. Essentially what this is an Endstone quarry, which means it's a quarry for Endstone, believe it or not. And it is also trenchless, which means you don't have to make any side trenches for it. And the clearance at the bottom is already there for you. You get a free 10 blocks of clearance at the bottom of the world. It's an 11 block quarry, and it's a little bit different from other 11 block quarries in a few ways. But the main things is that it has a TNT system that drops from above instead of up excel, and I'll explain that later. And it also doesn't have any way to deal with gravity blocks because it doesn't need to. What we have here on Chronos is we have a 396 wide quarry right here, and pretty much 400 blocks wide. We could have made it wider. We were worried about performance, but it's actually pretty lag friendly. And you can watch the MSPT at the top. We currently have 4 players online, but I'm next to the quarry, so I don't really count. End switch is not doing much. Main storage is loaded. I don't know if it's running. I don't think it is. And bedbot, which is in spawn chunks. So not a whole lot going on the server. So idle is 10 MSPT. The quarry, I think, I don't know how much it adds exactly, but it's not a whole lot. I think it's like at most, I think it's like 5 MS on average, and then it can peak at like, I don't know how much it peaks at actually. But it peaks much higher because at the end of the slice, there's a lot more going on. But anyways, the way it's able to be very lag friendly is because of these grabbers. And I guess I'll just jump right into talking about the design of the quarry. It's because of these grabbers, and these grabbers are designed by Attila, a fellow Chronos member who worked with me on this project. He designed these block grabbers, and I use them because they're very minimal. They have a very small amount of blocks, and the general idea is, or my general advice is for making quarries is, you want to reduce the amount of moving blocks as much as possible, because moving blocks are laggy, and if you have a lot of them, then you have a lot of lag. If you have less of them, then you have less lag. So you want to reduce the amount of moving blocks as much as possible to make the quarry less laggy and therefore less width limited, so you can make it wider without crashing your server, or without lagging it to the point where it's unplayable. You may, or something I want to note with these grabbers is that there's no slime on the sides of this one. So here you have a typical block grabber. These ones have stuff attached to it, but this is what it looks like. There's no slime attached to the side, which means it can go down and slide past the side of the terrain, and you don't have to make trenches because there's no liquids or anything that'll spill down and form cobble or whatever. So you don't have to make trenches for this. But these grabbers do have slime on the other side, and that's why if you go to the other side of the quarry, we have a different grabber design. This one's also by Attila. This one doesn't have any sticky blocks on the side either, but this time on the other side. So that way this one can also slide past. Oh look, there's an end island that it's sliding past. So it doesn't have to don't have to make a trench on that side either. And again, like I mentioned, you get a free 10 blocks of clearance at the bottom of the world in the end dimension, so you don't have to run a tunnel bore either like you would have to in the overworld. The only thing I would have to note for prep work is you'd have to clear any end cities that are in the way. You have to clear any gateways that are in the way. You'd have to clear space. If there's end islands in the way of where you want to build the quarry, you'd have to clear those as well. Although theoretically you could pick a spot where there are no end islands, and you would have to clear you wouldn't have to clear anything. But if you pick a spot where there are endlight islands, you will have to do that. And of course, you also want to make a storage for it, unless you want to stand at the output and collect items. Although theoretically, as I mentioned, if there's no end cities and there's no gateways and there's no end islands in the spot where you want to build the quarry, and if you picked your location right, you wouldn't have to clear anything, and you stood at the output and collected the items and loaded them into boxes, theoretically you would need no prep work besides collecting the items. You could just build it and run it, but that's not really ideal because you'd want to have a storage at the very least. Speaking of storage, our storage solution was engineered by a fellow Chronos member, Ners, and he came up with this solution. First of all, we have the very standard water stream on the side of the quarry. The items get flushed to the side, and they flow to these loaders. And now there's a bunch of different loaders. We have a bunch of them, and all of these ones are switched off because of this piston right here. And we have a little observer attached to this. I just added a little piston worm here. This observer for the temp switching. There's not one over there, but there are pistons here. And basically, when this piston gets triggered, it switches it off by blocking the stream and letting the water flow. And so the items would flow past it. And that would essentially turn off those loaders. These ones are still on because these are the last ones. It's actually almost done running. These loaders are the 6X loaders by Phil Goodinator. They're very good loaders, and I highly recommend them. I highly recommend them if you're looking for 6X loaders. Use the ones by Phil Goodinator. They're pretty much ideal. And what we do is actually, what most people do is they store the items on site either in small bulk storages or they transport the items to a big one. Well, we still do that, but it's a little bit different because we have a centralized one in case we want to run more of these Endstone quarries in the future. We have a chest cart system where the chest carts get loaded with the boxes of Endstone, as you can see, and then they get dumped onto this rail line, and then they get moved to this flying machine over here, which has a bunch of these full chest carts. And as you can see, if I check the F3 menu, we have 174 entities. And if I type in 174 times 1728 times 27, that will give us the number of items that we have. Let me turn on the chat real quick. So we have 8.1 million items stored on this flying machine currently. Now, why is it on a flying machine? Why don't we have a bulk storage here? Well, it's because we have a centralized bulk storage over to that. So we're going to use the flying machine to transport the items all the way over here, which will take a second to fly over. And here is our nice decorated storage area for the Endstone Quarry. It's a little bit far away, a little bit not ideal, but it is the point of it is to have a gateway here. And to be able to access it easily from the main end island. So that's why it's not next to the quarry. And I think most people would probably, what they would do is they would have the storage next to the quarry and just transport the items, just fly them over. That's fine. We're Chronos though, so we picked an overly unnecessarily complicated solution. But it's very convenient. It'll be convenient for us in the long run. Because we'll be able to transport the chest carts directly to the overworld from the bulk storage or directly from the quarry if we wanted to. So how it works is once we fly the carts over, we dump them into this water here, and they get transported over to this holding area where they are we can either select to send them to the gateway where they'll be sent to the overworld, or we can send them to fill the bulk storage. So they either get sent over to this gateway here, or they get sent over to this bulk storage. And again, all this storage stuff was designed by Ners. Maybe not Not all the individual components were, but it was all put together by Neres. So shout outs to him for setting us all up. And the decoration for this area, by the way, is by 2 decorators on Chronos, Sam and Obi. So under my impression that yeah, they did a really good job with this decoration. And this will be a nice thing to show during tours. But back to the quarry. That's how we're dealing with the items. I want to talk about how the quarry actually works. So while I explain it, let's turn it on and watch it run, so it makes things a little bit easier to explain. So how it works, any 11 block quarry works. First of all, is has these block grabbers, and what they do is they pull the blocks out from the terrain, and then these return stations, which by the way are designed by Binary, who is another Chronos member. He helps work on this. This is a fantastic contribution he made. What I was using before was I was using double piston extenders, which are not ideal. He just used honey that slides past the slime and pulls the observer back, which is much better than using a double piston extender. If you ever seen the old return stations, you would know what I'm talking about. These are much better. They're actually kind of fun to build and survival, which is really nice. So those return stations are spaced out every 11 blocks, and then hence the name 11 block quarry. They're spaced out every 11 blocks because of the piston push limit. And that's because when the grabbers are pushing the blocks up into the unloading system, which I'll talk about later, there's this extra layer of blocks that gets left behind. So if they grab 12 blocks at a time, then they would hit this layer of blocks, and they would be over push limit. It would be 13, and then the block grabbers would crash. So it has to be 11 blocks. There are layouts to make 12 block quarries, but I didn't go for them. Maybe it's a thing that I'll go for in a future version of this quarry, but for now, it's just an 11 block quarry. I don't know how worth it it'll be, but yeah, for now it's an 11 block quarry. Again, the grabbers are by Attila, and the return stations are by Binary. And the return stations are also actually activated by the grabber, which I think that idea came from Attila as well. So the block grabbers then, once they're told to move back by the return stations, they bring the blocks up, and then the unloading system pushes them out, as you can see, and then the TNT blows the items. You might see a few items being blown up. That's because item loss is 5%. The collection rate is 95%, which is not bad at all. And here you can see the storage running. By the way, you can see the items flowing into the loaders, which is nice. Oh, I forgot to mention the items cycle 4 times. I think it uses the cactus to lower the health of the items somehow. It like briefly touches the items, I guess. I don't really know exactly how it works, but that's my rough knowledge. And it cycles the items 4 times. So if items don't get in the hoppers the first time, they have 3 more chances. Anyways, back to the quarry. I just wanted to quickly mention that. Yeah, the collection rate is 95%, which is pretty good for a double layer block stream. It's very hard to actually get 99% with this, if it's possible at all. I'm not sure if it is. With one item type, it's easier. With more item types, like if you're running this in a mesa, it's probably not gonna be very good at all. You're gonna get a lot more loss than 5%. But for one item type, it's a lot better. And actually, you can see the quarry moving, which I'll explain how that works in a second. It's very satisfying to watch, though. And that's the quarry moving forward. So yeah, there's six rows of return stations. Once all of them are activated, the pushers at the bottom move up, and then the pushers are basically how the quarry detects the pushers and moves forward. And yeah, so how that works is that the pushers will push forward this AND gate right here with a bunch of quasi-powered pistons with one directly powered piston at the very end. So if all of them get moved forward at the same time, then this piston at the very end will be triggered and it'll start the moving system. If not all the pushers arrive, if something gets stuck, the Quarry will detect that. That's how this AND gate works. The Quarry will detect that it got stuck and it won't move forward, and that will prevent disaster from happening, basically. So essentially, it's like so basically, but I said essentially instead. That's my twist on the saying. So essentially, how this works. The brain circuitry. I want to talk about the brain circuitry because the brain circuitry is really cool. How it works is we have this little signal here, this chain of wires here that leads to the flying machine. And what happens is it gets triggered by the block grabbers, and this one block grabber has an observer on the back of it, and it triggers that, which sends a signal to this timer flying machine. This flying machine controls the unloading system, which is this clock right here, and the TNT system, which is this clock right here. All of that's controlled by this one flying machine, as well as the launch circuit, which is this bud wire right here, which launches the grabbers forward. And the reason I use a flying machine here is because it takes time for the blocks to be unloaded and to be blown up. So I need to use the amount of time that it takes for this flying machine to move from point A to point B and back to point A to generate the delay required for everything to happen. Otherwise, it'll stop too soon and the Quarry will break. So that's why I have this return station all the way out here. And what it'll do, it'll first, once it's triggered, it will activate this piston, which will activate this piston, which turns on this clock, and it sends a signal to this wire to turn on this clock as well. And then, as you can see, that's what just happened. This redstone block moved. Then it returns, and then it closes this. It closes these clocks like this, and then they stop firing. And so this bud wire controlling the unloading circuit stops pulsing, and so does this bud wire controlling the TNT system. And then at the very end, it has another observer here that triggers this piston right here. And this piston sends a pulse to this, which double pulses this, which pulses this AND gate, or not AND gate, this bud wire, which launches the block grabbers. And that's basically the stationary circuitry. That's the per layer circuitry. That happens multiple times per layer. And again, all of this is controlled by the grabbers at heart. So the grabbers complete the loop every time. And then, once it's done with the 6 layers, it moves forward, as I mentioned. And I want to talk about specifically how that works. So as I mentioned, this moves forward after the pushers arrive, if all of them arrive, that is. And then we have a delay flying machine. So this part moves forward. This delay flying machine, and again, this is a concept for any slimestoners watching, and you can take this exact circuit if you like. I didn't come up with this, but it's a really nice circuit. I actually found it on Attila's quarry, so maybe Attila came up with it, or maybe it was someone else. I don't know. But this circuit right here is a really simple really simple station and a return station for a flying machine. I use this flying machine for delay. So again, I use the time it takes for this flying machine to move from point A to point B until I move this part. Instead of chaining a bunch of extensions like you'll see on some other slimestone, some people don't use flying machines for that, and instead they use a bunch of extensions, which is less ideal. And again, I have one here as well, which uses this observer here, which collides with this, and double pulses this, and it causes it to return after it moves this observer forward, which is really, really neat. But yeah, that's a nice concept for any slimestones watching. If you want a lot of delay, use a flying machine. It's it's a lot better than spamming extensions. So you use the delay from this flying machine. The reason I need it is to wait for the TNT system to get close to stopping before moving forward. because it'll break if I move it forward while it's running. And actually you get to see it move forward again. So as you can see, this will get moved forward. Then this flying machine moves. And then what that'll do is it'll start the moving sequence, and I'll go into detail a little bit more about how that works. These honey segments are used to push limit the block grabbers because I need to pulse them, and this is a little annoying thing about this, is the block grabbers can't be moved forward with the endstone in front of them. There's too much endstone, so I have to move the endstone back each time to make sure that it is consistent, to make sure that there's always endstone in front of it, because otherwise if there's an endstone over here, then the block grabbers will pull it when it's pulsed, which is not good, and then some blocks will be in front of it and some blocks won't, so it'll be completely inconsistent and it'll break very badly. An important thing to note is if a quarry is going to break, you want it to at least break consistently so that you can fix it easier than if it breaks inconsistently. But obviously, ideally, you don't want it to break at all. But yeah, that makes sure that it's consistent so that the block grabbers will push forward everything and won't pull anything. But they have to get pulsed so that the blocks get pushed forward, so that the block grabbers aren't push limited, so that the block grabbers can get pushed forward. So what we have here to do that is we have, first of all, this instant extension moves forward, and this is what also returns the pushers. So it does two things. It returns the pushers with this double pulsed piston, because it gets pulsed on the rising edge and the falling edge of this instant extension. And these honey segments push limit the block grabbers so that they can't be moved forward when we trigger the launch circuit with this double pulse here, this is the launch circuit right here, which is normally powered by that, but we also trigger it a few times. We actually trigger it 3 times during the moving sequence. This is the first time it gets triggered by this observer here. See what just moved up and down. And that will trigger this bud line, which will move the observers forward, which will pulse the sticky pistons. And then that'll happen, and then this will move forward, and this will move forward. This is just extensions at this point, just moving forward this. Again, we have this delay flying machine here, because the reason why we need it is because when this clock moves, it pulses the observers a gajillion times. So you have to wait for it to stop pulsing, because of this block is like moving back and forth. You have to wait for that to stop until you move this instant extension, so that the TNT doesn't get pulsed a billion times after it moves. That would be bad. You don't want that to happen. And then while that's happening, it moves forward the on and off switch, and then as it moves forward the on and off switch, actually it also pulses this AND gate a second time to move the observers back, because they need to be in the rear position to move forward. So that's the second time it gets pulsed, and while that happens, this flying machine gets triggered. This is the same circuit again. This gets triggered, and it uses it. I need the delay so that it doesn't happen, so that everything doesn't happen too fast. It pushes forward this. This is a little funky. This piston gets moved forward, and then this glazed terracotta gets moved forward, which triggers this observer, which triggers this piston after it gets moved forward, and then so it doesn't look like an extension now, but this is how it works. It's kind of like it's a delay circuit for this piston, essentially. This piston gets moved forward, and then it waits until this flying machine moves forward, and then it powers. Then I got a little few extensions here into this instant extension, which moves forward the block grabbers. And then once the block grabbers are moved forward, we have some extensions at the end. I just attached this to the end of the sequence here to move forward this observer, which, look at this again, this is the same launch circuit from before. This is the third time it gets pulsed. This will get pulsed after everything is moved forward, and it'll launch the block grabbers after they move forward, and then it will start the next slice. And so at that point, everything will have been moved forward, and the quarry will start mining the next slice. And that is how an 11 block quarry works. That's how this 11 block quarry works. The TNT is dropped from above. I forgot to mention the TNT is dropped from above because it's simpler this way. Because how it used to be with other 11 block quarries, they were either launched backwards, or worse, they were actually dropped and then launched up and backwards. So it's even more complicated than it had to be. It was cool to watch, and it wasn't that bad, but it was more build effort, and I decided to just do away with that and go with I decided to go with a simpler system, just drop it from above. I think this is a better way of doing the TNT system. So that's how I did it instead, and it's definitely nicer to build in survival than any other 11 block quarry TNT system that I've seen. It's a lot simpler. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, these the way it moves the water is it has the oh, by the way, it's moving forward. I kind of wish I was watching it, but here I am talking about the fucking water system. It just pushes forward a waterlogged block. Other designs older designs used armor stands with Frostwalker boots, and I'm gonna explain why that's bad. Why it's bad is it's because you'd have to, 1, find a Frostwalker 1 villager, 2, you'd have to enchant a bunch of boots with Frostwalker 1. You'd have to trade with the villager. You'd have to enchant the boots with the Frostwalker. You'd have to, when you're building the core, you'd have to clip the armor stands into the blocks, and then you'd have to put the boots onto the armor stands. And that's just way too much work when you could really just waterlog a block and push it with a short pulse sticky piston to move the water. So that's what I do instead. It's a lot simpler, and it's definitely a lot better than armor stands. Yuck. Yeah, so finally doing away with that horrible trend. We should never have ever put armor stands on quarries. That was just a bad idea. Well, I mean, we had to before waterlogged blocks existed, but ever since waterlogged blocks were a thing, I'm shocked that people didn't immediately switch to using them. Because this is just a better way of moving water. Anyways, that is all I have to say about this quarry. Well, I don't know. I guess there's a couple more things I have to say. First of all, this is a quarry. Not just an end quarry, it's a quarry. And if you think that there's a difference between an end quarry and a quarry, then you are clinically insane. And it's also trenchless, because you don't have to make any trenches for it. And if you think that it's not trenchless and it's actually just a quarry that doesn't require any trenches to be made, you are clinically insane. And if you disagree with me, you are clinically insane, because I am right 100% of the time. That being said, if you're one of the 99% of the people who don't argue semantics about a quarry, then make sure to hit the like button and subscribe and comment, I guess. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye now.